You have hundreds of photos on your phone. 0 of them are on the internet. And when someone points a camera in your direction, your first instinct isn't to smile, it's to step out of the frame. You've watched people post their meals, their grief, their Tuesday afternoon. And something in you, something quiet and precise, just can't. Not won't, can't. What your brain is actually protecting when it refuses to let you press share is something most people have already surrendered without realizing it, and it is not a small thing. In 1956, sociologist Irving Goffman described something that would later explain the entire internet. He called it impression management, the idea that every interaction is a performance, that we all, consciously or not, shape what others see. We adjust our tone, our posture, our stories, depending on the audience. Social media didn't invent that. It industrialized it. It turned a deeply human tendency into a factory floor. Post, caption, filter, count the reaction, repeat. But psychologists Deci and Ryan, the architects of self-determination theory, found that humans have 3 core psychological needs: competence, connection, and autonomy. The people who never post aren't failing to meet those needs. They simply found other ways to fill them. Quieter ways, more intentional ways. But the reasons behind that silence are not all the same. There's a type of person who was taught, early, that being seen has a cost. Maybe it was a parent who used their vulnerability against them. A friendship that turned private moments into social currency. A time they shared something real and felt it be weaponized, not held. Psychologists describe this as behavioral inhibition rooted in relational threat history. In simpler terms, your nervous system learned that visibility equals vulnerability. Not once, enough times that the lesson became architecture. So The Guardian built something elegant, a wall that looks like minimalism. They don't post because they don't need to prove their life to anyone. And that's true. But underneath that truth, there's a protection protocol running silently, all the time. It isn't fear, exactly. It's intelligence accumulated through pain. They post nothing and lose nothing. And somewhere deep in their nervous system, that feels like winning. Then there's the watcher. They scroll for hours. They know everyone's highlights. They double tap. They read every caption. They genuinely care about the lives moving across that screen. But their own page? Empty. Their own presence in that space? Invisible. This is where social comparison theory enters, first described by Leon Festinger in 1954. Humans are neurologically wired to measure themselves against others. Social media didn't just enable that instinct, it gave it a scoreboard. For the watcher, the calculation runs before they even open the camera app. What if no one responds? What if someone judges it? What if the person who matters most sees it and isn't moved? Research on sensory processing sensitivity, a trait found in roughly 20% of the population, describes these people as deep processors. They notice what others miss, including social risk. Every potential post runs through an invisible filter: consequence, perception, probability of rejection. It's not laziness. It's a nervous system that decided the math doesn't add up. And here's the part nobody says out loud. They want to post. There's a version of them that typed the caption, chose the photo, hovered over share, and deleted it. More than once. Not because they don't care, but because they care far too much. If this is already starting to feel uncomfortably familiar, subscribe to Quiet Psychology. Because what comes next goes somewhere much darker and much closer to the truth. But here's where it gets complicated. There's a person who doesn't stay off social media because they're protecting themselves. Not because of comparison anxiety. Not because of relational wounds. They stay off because they can see through the entire game. They know that every post is a curation. Every caption is a frame. Every highlight reel is a performance of a self that may or may not actually exist. And they refuse. quietly, firmly, almost philosophically, to participate in what they can only see as theatre. Goffman saw this too. He described the people who step outside the performance as those who've lost faith in the role they're supposed to play. Not rebellious, just awake. The seer's default mode network, the brain's resting state system, active when we reflect, imagine, and self-reference, runs in constant override. They can't turn off the awareness. They walk into a social media post the way a magician walks into a magic show, already knowing where the trick is hidden. But here's the paradox that makes this specific. The seer understands human performance better than almost anyone, and that understanding slowly becomes isolation, because when you see through every mirror, you stop being able to look at your own reflection without deconstructing it. Their silence isn't arrogance, it's a form of grief for a simpler way of being seen. Now, this next part might be uncomfortable to hear. Not everyone who stays invisible online is protecting something valuable. Some people aren't visible because something inside them has gone quiet, not by choice, but by weight. The kind of weight that doesn't announce itself with drama. The kind that makes even the smallest act of self-expression feel like too much energy to find. Researchers describe dorsal vagal shutdown as a nervous system response to chronic overwhelm, a biological retreat where the body conserves resources by pulling back from engagement. It doesn't feel like sadness. It feels like nothing, like existing just beneath the surface of your own life. The ghost doesn't post, because posting requires believing, on some level, that your presence matters. And that belief has gone somewhere very dark. So I need to ask you something directly. Do you stay invisible online because you don't need the attention, or because you're afraid of what happens when people actually see you? Are you protecting yourself, or are you disappearing? Because those are two very different silences, and only one of them is a choice. Here's what all four of these people share. None of them are broken. The Guardian is not damaged. They're self-aware enough to understand what visibility costs, and precise enough not to pay it carelessly. The Watcher is not weak. They feel at a depth that deserves a container more honest than a public feed. The Seer is not cynical. They see too clearly, and that clarity is exhausting, yes, but it is also rare. The world needs people who refuse to be fooled by the performance. And the Ghost? The Ghost needs something this video cannot give, but can point toward. If you recognized yourself in that fourth profile, if the silence feels more like disappearing than like protecting, please reach out to someone, not a follower, a person, someone whose voice you can actually hear. For everyone else, here's what the science confirms. Self-determination theory tells us that humans flourish when they feel genuinely competent, connected, and autonomous. Social media promised all three. For many people, it delivered the opposite. Performance anxiety dressed as competence. Metric dependency dressed as connection. Algorithm pressure dressed as freedom. You don't have to upload your existence to prove it's real. If you love someone like this, a partner, a friend, a child who never posts, don't ask them why they're so private. Don't interpret their digital silence as emotional distance. Ask them what they did today, what they read, what moved them, and then be quiet long enough to hear the answer. And if you are this person, your silence is not an absence. It's a choice your nervous system made to protect something most people have already given away without a second thought. That is not a flaw. That is a form of integrity that is becoming harder to find. Think about what everyone else is doing right now. Filtering, cropping, captioning, waiting, taking a moment of real life, a meal, a morning, a face they love, and immediately translating it into content. Asking, before they've even finished experiencing it, how does this look on a screen? That translation has a cost. Something gets lost in it. Some texture of the original that doesn't survive compression. You didn't pay that cost. While the world compressed its life into 6 inches of glass, you stayed in the original. Full resolution. No filter, no caption, no waiting for the approval of strangers who will have forgotten what they liked before they finish scrolling. There is something quiet and radical about refusing to perform your existence. Not because performance is wrong, it isn't always, but because some minds are simply wired for something else. For presence over proof, for depth over display, for a life that doesn't need to be uploaded to be fully, unmistakably real. The people who never post aren't missing from social media. They're somewhere else entirely, doing something that doesn't require an audience. And that silence, the one the world keeps asking them to break, is not emptiness. It's the sound of a life being lived at full volume, without a lens.